In September 2015, Martin Shkreli hit the mainstream news when his company raised the price of a drug used in AIDS treatment by over 5,000%. He became the focus point for a lot of the anger and confusion that Americans feel about pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare system in general. Today we're going to look at how Shkreli was able to make such a huge price hike and how the pharmaceutical industry works. Of course, we'll need to put this in the context of the wider healthcare industry, but as you should know, this is an incredibly complicated area, so we can only cover a fraction of it. Right now, the US spends over $8,000 per person per year on healthcare. That figure is split fairly evenly down the middle, so half the money is public expenditure through government and state programs, and half is private insurance. This $8,000 total is far higher than anywhere else in the world. The closest rival is Norway, who spends around $5,500 per person, the majority being public money. An astonishing 17.6% of America's GDP is spent on healthcare, which is double the average for most developed countries. Why is the number so high? Well, there's no easy answer, but we're going to look at what some believe is the biggest factor, a marketing term we like to call inelastic demand. Inelastic demand is where the price of a product doesn't affect its demand. For most products, if you make them more expensive, you sell less, you make them cheaper, you sell more, which is pretty obvious. But occasionally you have something so vital that people keep buying it, no matter what. The biggest two examples are gasoline and healthcare. People don't start riding the bus when gas prices go up. They just swallow the cost and keep driving to work. And healthcare is even more inelastic. You pay whatever it takes to keep your loved ones alive. What's more, with gas, you can maybe save a few cents by comparing petrol stations, but you often get zero competition on healthcare, so you have no choice. Shkreli founded Turing Pharmaceuticals in 2015, with the main purpose of exploiting the inelastic demand for drugs whose patent had expired. These patents normally last about 20 years, after which anybody can make the drug. However, that doesn't mean you can create your own version and immediately start selling it. Since this is medicine, there's a long and expensive regulation process you need to follow before any new product is sold on the market, even if it's just a generic version of one that's been sold for years. But if you buy up the old patent, you can start selling right away. So Turing started by buying 3 old patents from another pharma company called Redifin, and sold the drugs at a new, higher price point. In August 2015, they bought the patent for Daraprim for $55 million from Impax Laboratories. Part of the deal was that Impax would remove all the stock from wholesalers and pharmacies by strictly limiting distribution. This meant that when Turing took over production and raised the price from $13.50 per pill to $750 per pill, there was nowhere else to get the drug. Daraprim is used to treat a parasite infection called toxoplasmosis, and for AIDS patients, this can be a matter of life or death. A typical course is between 1 to 3 weeks, so it would be a minimum spend of $5,000. Most patients obviously can't afford such a huge cost, so how did Turing get paid? Most of the time, the money either came from the patient's insurance company or from a government-funded program like Medicaid or Medicare. But there are a huge number of variables between states, like age, income, and marital status. So that's where we see the root of the problem. One of the key reasons pharmaceuticals and medical equipment are so expensive in the US is that there's no central organization to negotiate on price. This is how pharmaceutical companies use inelastic demand to make a huge profit. If you look at the UK, the government owns the hospitals and employs the doctors, making healthcare basically one big centralized system called the NHS. They can go out and negotiate a good price on drugs because if you want to sell pharmaceuticals in the UK, the NHS are basically your only option. But in the United States, hospitals are privately owned, so they don't hold a lot of leverage against giant pharmaceutical companies. Medicaid is varied between the states, so again, not much leverage. And Medicare is actually pretty centralized, so you know what, they often do get a better price than everybody else. Turing knew that they could set a very high price because there's no one group with the power to say no. And they knew that the regulatory laws made it unlikely that a competitor could produce a similar product and beat them on cost. Finally, they knew that even when the story blew up and got in the media, 99% of people wouldn't understand the industry well enough to realize that regular people always pay these costs, whether it's through higher taxes or higher insurance premiums. Some drug research is incredibly long and expensive, so pharmaceutical companies do need to cover these costs, and the government need to support innovation by offering tax breaks and patents and so on. However, often the research comes out of government-funded universities, and then the pharma companies step in and take over, funding a drug that's already promising. There's no easy fix, and there's a lot of aspects we couldn't cover today, but I hope that's given you a little bit of insight into what is happening. Want to learn more about sales and marketing? Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and more B2B sales training. And if you need marketing support for your digital agency, check out experiment27.com. Thanks.